We're glad you decided to check out this message by Seabreeze Church and hope that you benefit from it. We also hope that you would join us either online or in person on a Sunday. We have a 9 o'clock live streamed service online, and then we have in-person services on our campus at 9 and 10:30. So again, we hope that you would join us, and we hope that you enjoy this message.
Well, good morning. It's great to be with you guys. Like Bevan said, my name's Elliot, and today we're going to continue this series called The Usual Suspects, where we are looking at 5 Hebrew words that all translate into English as the word fool. And the reason that these words, they're distinct in Hebrew, but they translate into English as fool, is because they all have the same idea behind them. They all mean to factor God out. All of these patterns, these describe approaches to life, ways of going through life, that all at their base, they factor God out as an individual goes through life and makes decisions. So we've been working through these foolish patterns, and each one of us, we either have a dominant foolish pattern or we're a mixture. There's kind of a variety of them. We've got 2 or 3 on the list as we go through it. And these, as we've looked at them, these are not personality traits. These are not kind of fun little quirks that we have. These are destructive ways of life that bring pain not only into our lives, but also pain into the lives of the people that we love. And I think one of the most devastating implications of the fools is not just where they end up, but also the fact that through the course of our lives, we really are convinced that these foolish patterns will get us the life that we want. And they won't. They will not end up where we want to end up. They'll end up somewhere very different. But deep down, we're convinced if we do life this way, we'll get the life that we want. So as we've gone through the process, we've identified characters from the Marvel films that help us remember these foolish patterns. And we've talked about a couple of the foolish patterns so far. We've talked about the easy way, the my way, and the glory way. And today, we are going to talk about the most fun of all the foolish patterns, which is the fun way foolish pattern. Now, for me, this is not my dominant foolish pattern, but I do have a decent amount of the fun way mixed in. And I realized this when I was in college. That's when it kind of set into me that, okay, this is one of the patterns that I have. And in college, I lived in an all-male dorm, and you take a bunch of 18-year-old guys with way too much free time and really no supervision at all, and cram them into an enclosed space, and then you throw a few fun ways into the mix, and they can do a lot of stupid things. And so I have one memory in particular that stands out from that period of time. And the way the evening started is a group of us had a friend who was playing in a band. They were in kind of a punk rock band, and they were playing at this venue, and so they said, hey, we're playing, why don't you guys come? So, we loaded up in my buddy's car, and we headed over to this concert, to this show to see our buddy play. And right next to the venue, there was a Party Galaxy store, one of those stores that's got masks and party decor and other stuff like that. And so we get to the venue, and we're there a little bit early, and we're like, well, we need to waste some time, so let's go in this party store, and get see what's in there. We didn't plan to buy anything, but as we're walking the aisles, one of my buddies all of a sudden emerges from this other aisle, and he's holding up a gorilla mask, and he's like, it's $150. And we're like, oh, okay, this is a no-brainer. Yeah, let's buy it. We don't know how we're going to use it, what we're going to do with this mask. So we purchased the mask, and then we go to the concert, and after the concert, we're hanging out with the band, and we're talking, and I remember this so vividly. The guy who bought the mask, it had nothing to do with the conversation. We're just standing there talking about something that had happened in the show. He just reaches into his shirt, pulls out the gorilla mask, and says, look what I got. And then one of the guys in the band, just right on point, just says, I have a bullhorn in my car. And then another guy says, well, I have a water balloon launcher. So we did not think this out. We did not plan this. 8 of us loaded up into 2 trucks, and we headed to this place called Campus Corner, which was where all the bars were. And I'm not going to get into the details of what happened that night. I will maybe at some point share that in another story. But I will say, looking back, I am in shock that we made it out without getting beat senseless. I mean, what we did that night over the course of several hours was so stupid. I mean, seriously, I look back and I cannot believe that we made it out. But that's really the way the fun way pattern plays out. I mean, in the moment, the fun way is not thinking at all. They're not thinking, what could happen? What are the consequences? All they think is, hey, that sounds fun. That's interesting. That's probably going to feel good. Let's do it. And then over the course of time, they look back and they see, and there's a lot of regret because there's a lot of stuff the fun way does over and over that's just really, really stupid. Even in those 4 years when I was in college, I got to kind of see this pattern play out in just 4 short years. I had friends that I hung out with that were definitely fun ways who, some of them, they were kicked off the athletic teams that they were on. Some of them were on full ride scholarships. Some of them were kicked off the teams. Some of them made national headlines. I mean, some of them, what they did, I found out through ESPN. I mean, I went on ESPN and I was like, I couldn't believe it. They got kicked out of the sports teams. They lost scholarships. They got removed from the university because often it wasn't like a pattern of things. A lot of times it was just in the moment, a desire hit. They had some impulse. They acted on it. It seemed small at the time, like what's the worst that could happen? And a lot of times it had devastating consequences. So in a short amount of time, I saw this pattern play out. And this is really what happens. The fun way, they have an impulse, they have a desire, they start to obsess over it, they focus on it, then they act upon it, and it brings devastating consequences. The Hebrew word that describes the fun way pattern is the word sakal. And it's related to the easy way pattern that we looked at. So related to the easy way word kasil. Both words have the idea of to swell. And the easy way is someone who's swollen with false hope. It means to swell with false hope. And the fun way, it also has the idea of to swell, but it's different because for the fun way, the sakal, it means to swell with impulse. So for the fun way, what they are is they are one big impulse after another. A desire pops up, it grows, they focus on it, they obsess over it, and then they act on that desire. And then the next desire, it pops up, they focus on it, they obsess over it, and then they act on it. And that's just the series of events. They're one big desire after the next. The Marvel character that shows signs, I think, of being a fun way fool is Rocket. Now, Rocket is he's one of the more popular characters, and he's a lot of fun. He's also really funny. A lot of people, he gets a lot of laughs throughout the movies. There's a clip I'm going to show you that kind of captures the fun way pattern and how they think. And in this clip, they're trying to escape from prison. The Guardians of the Galaxy are trying to escape from prison. And in the process, he tells people what he needs them to give him in order to escape. And he tells Star-Lord that he needs a prosthetic leg. So let's check out this clip and see the fun way at work.
We're gonna get out of here. We're gonna need to get into that watchtower. And to do that, I'm gonna need a few things. That dude there, I need his prosthetic leg.
His leg?
Yeah.
I'll get the armband.
Leg.
You need my what?
Drop the leg! Drop the leg! And move back to your cell!
Available guards in full combat gear.
Here you go. Oh, I was just kidding about the leg. I just need these two things.
What?
No, I thought it'd be funny. Was it funny? No, wait, what did he look like hopping around?
I had to transfer him 30,000 units.
So that's a good picture of the fun way. For the fun way, a lot of times in the moment, it might be fun. And in the moment, it leads to a lot of laughs. But as you study this pattern and you study the outcome, the fun way is anything but fun or funny. The fun way pattern, especially over the course of a life, actually leads to a really sad life. That's what it leads to. To understand the fun way, we're going to look at what's going on inside of this person's heart. What's going on inside of their heart that leads to this? And we're going to review what's going on inside of the heart. So for all of us, there's several key factors that help us make decisions, things that are going on inside of our hearts. The Bible, when the Bible talks about the heart, sometimes it also uses the word mind in a similar way. When it talks about that, it's talking about the control center, the decision-making center of who we are, where we make decisions, where our behavior flows out of. And inside of our hearts, we all have values. There's things that we value. And on our value list, we actually have a ranking. It'd be more accurate to be, okay, here's the top value, here's the second value, here's the third value. So as we go through life, there's an order of priority that we have on our values. And based on our values, we set goals that we begin to work towards. And then in our heart, we also have conclusions about how we think life works. We call this our perspectives. We have a way that we think life works. And from this, we start to plan and come up with a strategy that helps us accomplish our goals. And then the third important thing that happens is we decide on a behavior. Given our values and given our perspective, what's going on inside of our heart, what we think is most important, how we think life works, then we decide on a behavior. We make a choice about a way of life. And these perspectives and values, as we do this over and over again, there's patterns of behavior that we develop. And so for the fun way or any of the other foolish patterns, these are patterns that they have learned and practiced. These are well-worn paths that they've gone down again and again. So what's going on inside of the fun way's heart? Let's look at that. Well, the first thing, for the fun way value is to feel good. This is the most important thing. What this person wants most is a feeling. They want to feel good. And there's nothing inherently wrong with feeling good. God's the one He designed our bodies. He's the one who has given us the ability to feel a wide range of emotions. He's given us bodies that can produce hormones like dopamine that help us feel good. So there's nothing inherently wrong with feeling good. But for this individual, feeling good is the most important thing. It is at the absolute top of their value list, and it's placed above God. And in their thinking, if they could just feel good enough, often enough, then they'd have the life that they want. So they're on this never-ending search to feel good. Ecclesiastes 10:3 describes it this way. It says, even as fools, that's our word, sakal, even as fools walk along the road, they lack sense and show everyone how stupid they are. It says that they lack sense. The idea is that they don't observe. They don't connect dots. They're impulsive. They're reckless. They don't use the mind that God has given them. Instead of using their mind to make reasoned decisions, they simply respond to the stimuli in the environment around them. If you watch the pattern of this person's life over time, it's like watching a dog walk down the street. I mean, it's not in a straight line. It's not purposeful. It's random. It's kind of all over the place. I mean, when a dog walks down the street, one of my friends, I was talking to him about this the other day. He talked about how sometimes they'll see somebody walk by in front of their house and they'll see that person has a dog and the dog's kind of bouncing all over the place. And then they'll take their dog outside to go on a walk and their dog almost follows the exact same path. It's like, oh, what does that smell over there? And oh, what's that over here? And oh, what's this sound? And oh, who was here before me in this situation? I mean, they're just like, it's random. It's impulsive. They're just responding to the stimuli in their environment. That's how the fun way moves through life. But we aren't to live this way because we've been made in the image of God. And part of being made in the image of God means that He's given us minds. He's given us ability to think and reason and make decisions that inform the future. He's given us the ability to imagine a future and then put in the work to bring that future into reality. He's given us the ability to do this. He's given us the ability to say no to our desires so that we can work towards and accomplish a greater purpose. This is what God's given us. But for the fun way, they don't use their brains. They're just guided by their impulse and their desires. Like it says, they lack sense. And the pattern of life is to move forward very similar to how an animal does, just kind of sniffing the air for, oh, what might be out there? What might that be? I wonder what that would be like. That's how they move through life. And this desire to feel good, it looks different for different people. For some people, they've got the fun way pattern, and for them, they want to feel good through chemicals. They're looking for some high. For other people, they want to feel good through experiences. It could be sex, it could be adventure, they could be thrill junkies. Some people want to feel good through purchases. They think that, okay, if I buy this thing, well, that will feel good. So they just keep purchasing. Other people, they look to feel good by being loved. So they're looking to create that feeling. They want to feel good. But because this individual has put feeling good at the center of life instead of God, whenever they get the thing they desire, what they realize is it doesn't satisfy them, because feeling good is the most important thing, and that will never satisfy. Only God can satisfy. And because he's been replaced, whenever they get that thing they're after, they realize this didn't satisfy. So then they have to go and look for something else. And over time, as they continue to do this and put feeling good as the most important thing, their ability to feel is diminished. They can't feel like they used to. And so what they lack for in quality of feelings, they make up for in quantity. They just have to feel more and more and more frequently and more intensely. And this is one of the reasons that this pattern often leads the fun way into addiction, because the absolute top value is to feel, to respond to the impulse when it swells, and to act on it. So this leads us into the fun way perspective. What's the fun way perspective? Fun way value is to feel good. The fun way perspective is there won't be consequences. The fun way thinks, I can do this and nothing bad's going to happen. It's a very short-sighted way of viewing life. They might even hear about the consequences. They might be warned, but their thinking is, that's not going to happen to me. So back to Rocket in the Marvel movies, we see him respond to a warning about a consequence with a fun way perspective. So let's play this clip.
Your criminal records have also been expunged.
Question. What if I see something that I want to take and it belongs to someone else?
Well, you will be arrested.
But what if I want it more than the person who has it?
Still illegal.
That doesn't follow. No, I want it more, sir. You understand? What are you laughing
If
at?
someone does something irksome, and I decide to remove his spine,
That's one of the worst crimes of all, so also illegal.
This is how the fun way thinks. The fun way thinks when they look at life, they could even be warned of the consequences, but their thinking is, but I want it. And because I want it, because I want to act on this desire, I mean, that's enough justification. What do you mean there's going to be consequences? It doesn't add up. It doesn't make any sense. Galatians chapter 6, verses 7 and 8 describes this world that God created us to live in, and this is what it says. It says, do not be deceived. Now, it starts off saying do not be deceived because the implication for us as Christians is we can be deceived. We can think about life in this world the wrong way. Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. So what that's saying is he can't be mocked means he set it up to work a certain way. If somebody's going to be proved wrong about how the world works, it's not going to be God. It's going to be us. He can't be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. Whoever sows to please the flesh, sowing to please the flesh is just doing whatever your impulse and desires tell you to do. From the flesh will reap destruction. Whoever sows to please the Spirit, this is doing life the way God instructs us to. Whoever sows to please the Spirit, from the Spirit will reap eternal life. So what this is saying is that God has created a cause and effect world that you and I live in. Our decisions have consequences attached to them. There are results, and the results are not random. They don't just randomly happen. They're based on the decisions that we make. The results come because of certain things that we decided to do. It's like farming. That's why it brings up reaping and sowing. You sow, you plant a seed, and that's what you're going to harvest. The fruit of what you're going to harvest in the future is based on the types of seeds, decisions that you plant and you make today. That's the point this is making. So if you decide, I'm going to take God seriously, I'm going to make wise decisions in line with how God has said life is supposed to work, well, then the future is you can expect good things. Life's going to improve. It's going to get better over time. Your experience is going to be up. But at the same time, that's a potential outcome if we make unwise decisions, if we ignore what God says, if we just act on desire and impulse, like the verse says, it says, you're going to reap destruction. You know, what's interesting about this word destruction, that word is also used to describe milk that's gone sour. It's bad. It's just not good anymore. So what it's saying is, in this cause and effect world that you and I live in, we can do that to our lives. If we just act on impulse and act on desire and do whatever our feelings tell us to do, what it's warning is you can get to a place where it's just not good anymore. It's bad. You've soured your life with your decision making. You know, for me as a parent, I realized one of my jobs is to help my kids understand this cause and effect world that they live in and to help them think through their consequences, to not believe the lie that, well, there's not going to be any consequences if I do this. I need to help them think through, if I make this decision, what are the consequences that could come as a result of that? You know, so recently how this looked in our family is my youngest, my 3-year-old, he was sitting on the couch and he was listening to something. And as he's sitting there on the couch, one of his older siblings, one of his sisters, comes in and sits down right in front of him. I mean, he's kind of on the back of the couch and she just sits down right in front of him and blocks him. And so this set off a series of events that resulted in hair being pulled and screaming and tears. And so, my wife and I, we stepped into the situation when it kind of got escalated and there was all this drama. And for my son, he's the one that pulled the hair. For him, there were some swift consequences because he needs to know, hey, whether he was provoked or not, we don't pull hair. And so he needed to know, okay, if I pull hair, there's some things that are unwanted that are going to happen pretty quickly. So that was part of it for him. But then for my daughter, whose hair was pulled and she did the screaming and the crying, once everything kind of settled down, I sat down with her and I just talked through it with her because I wanted to help her understand, okay, so you got your hair pulled, but what were the things that led up to that happening? And so I asked her, I said, hey, honey, talk to me about what happened. And the first thing she says is, well, he pulled my hair. Okay, well, what happened before that? Well, he pushed me. Okay, did anything happen between him pushing you and him pulling your hair? Well, I pinched him. Okay, good. So now we're getting somewhere. So then we worked it back and we just talked through it. And we got to the point where she said, well, it started when I sat down in front of him. Well, that's exactly right. That doesn't justify his behavior. I mean, he's still in the wrong, but it started when you sat down right in front of him and there were other places that you could have sat. And then along the way, there were decisions that you could have made to remove yourself from the situation. You didn't have to keep going down that path. As a parent, this is what I want my kids to be able to do. I want them to look at a situation and think about, okay, if I do that, what are the consequences that are attached to that? Because we live in this cause and effect world. My decisions bring results. And have I taken the time to think through, okay, if I act on this desire or act on that impulse, what are the things that could happen? That's part of my job as a parent, to help them realize they live in a real cause and effect world and they need to connect dots. Again, the verse says, don't be deceived. We live in a real world. We live in a world with consequences. But for the fun way, they are deceived. They can hear about the consequences. The consequences can be right in front of them. And they choose not to see it. They think, no, that's not going to happen to me. They don't connect the dots. Their perspective is short-sighted. And even if they do encounter the consequences, oftentimes as they talk about them, they'll talk in terms of, it's random. I can't believe this happened. It's somebody else's fault. It's just unfortunate circumstances. Almost like, I'm the victim here. Because their perspective is short-sighted. They're not connecting the dots between the action that they choose and then the consequences that come with that. A common fun way justification for behavior is I'm not hurting anyone. Though they want to feel good, they act on it, and then they'll say, well, I'm not hurting anyone. And really, behind that is this idea that, well, there's no consequences. I can do this, it's okay, it makes me feel better, there's no consequences, I'm not hurting anybody. And I understand that. I mean, you've got a desire, I want to feel good, that's my desire, my perspective is short-sighted, I don't think through the consequences, so I act, and in that moment, I feel good, so, there's nothing really going on. I'm not hurting anybody, there's no consequences. You can see this logic really play out, I think, in our culture's use of marijuana. Our attitude around marijuana has been changing, and our culture's use in it has been changing. And a lot of it goes back to this idea that, well, I'm not hurting anybody, and there's really no consequences. And there was a study that came out recently, and it was really fascinating. It showed the link between marijuana use and something called working memory. Working memory is your brain's ability to make informed decisions in the moment. It's your brain's ability to, in the moment, connect dots. And what the study found is even after the feel-good effects of marijuana have worn off, whether it's for infrequent users or even frequent users, it didn't matter. What they found is an individual's ability to make informed, in-the-moment decisions was damaged, even after the effects had worn off. There are consequences. And it's not just for us. I mean, God's given us minds to help us navigate this life that we live in. So not only are we impacted by that, but then all the people that are dependent on those minds that God gave us to make decisions, well, they're impacted too. They miss out. They lose because our minds are damaged and we're not making the decisions the way that we should be. Again, the verse says, don't be deceived. This is the world that we live in. We live in a real world with real consequences. We have to think beyond just, does this make me feel good? This brings us to the fun way behavior. The fun way behavior is intentional blinders. Now we know what blinders are. Horses put on blinders when they race. Blinders go over their eyes, and it helps the horse only see the goal in front of them. So they can't see the distractions. They can't see anything around them. For a fun way, what they do is they intentionally put blinders on so they don't have to hear or listen to anything that would go against the thing that they want to do. They intentionally put on these blinders so that they can focus on the thing that they want to do. They push everything, even wise counsel, out of focus and only focus on what they want. Jeremiah 5:21, another verse that talks about this, it says this. It says, "Hear this, you foolish," that's our word again, "you foolish and senseless people who have eyes but do not see, who have ears but do not hear." So what this verse is doing is it's making the point that reality is right in front of this person. They have eyes, they can see it, but somehow they don't see it. They have ears, they can hear it. They know it's being said, they can understand it, but they don't hear it. And it's making the point that seeing and hearing is actually attached to our desires. We see what we want to see. We hear what we want to hear. I mean, I see this in my kids all the time. Well, it'll be bedtime and we're picking up the house and we'll say, okay, we're going to clean up, and I'll make eye contact with one of them. I'm looking at you in the eye. Pick up these 3 things. And then later you come in the room and what happened? I didn't hear you. We were making eye contact. I could have whispered from the other room, "Do you want ice cream?" And they would hear it. Hearing and seeing is attached to desire. So for the fun way, you can plead with them, you can warn them, it can be right in front of them, but they don't see it. They don't hear it. And it's not because of ability, it's because they don't want to see it. They don't want to hear it. A while ago, Selena Gomez put out a song called "The Heart Wants What It Wants." I think it captures this idea really well. She's singing about a relationship that she shouldn't be in, but she just can't help it because the desire in the heart is so strong. So this is what she says. This is what she says in the verse going into the chorus. She says, "Save your advice because I won't hear. You might say it, but I'm not going to hear it. You might be right, but I don't care. It's not about what's right. It's not about what's best. It's not about what's beneficial. I don't care. There's a million reasons why I should give you up, but the heart wants what it wants. The heart wants what it wants." She says this almost 20 times in the song. She just keeps saying it over and over again. And that's often, for the fun way, that's the reasoning. Reality can be right in front of him. You can point out example after example of people that have ruined their lives with impulsive, rash decisions in the moment. But I want it. This is what my heart wants. So they put the blinders on and they move towards it. So let me give you an image of what this process looks like. So if we were to think through the cycle of a fun way, this is what it looks like. The fun way cycle, it starts because the top value is to feel good. At a heart level, what they want most is they want to feel good. So they see something, they desire it, they lock onto it, and because this thing is their top value, it becomes a consuming focus. The impulse swells. Then, because of the perspective that there's not going to be consequences, they intentionally put the blinders on, they choose to do that, and everything else fades out of focus, and they only see the thing they desire. So then the next thing is they act on that desire. They take the opportunity, they gratify it, and they act. And then, attached to their action, there's consequences. We live in a real world. The consequences strike, and they suffer for the decision that they made. Now, if the consequences are immediate enough, sometimes what the fun way will do is the fun way will scramble to get themselves out of the mess that they created. They'll scramble and start to try to clean it up because the consequence was so immediate that they can't deny that they made this decision and this is what happened. Sometimes in a situation where they're scrambling to clean up the mess, they'll look for somebody to step in and save them from the situation. As the Bible describes this fun way pattern, one of the patterns of the fun way is the fun way can become very religious. And they're not really looking for a long-term change in these situations. A lot of times what they want is they just want something or someone to save them from the immediate consequences of the decision that they've made. But if the consequences and the suffering is delayed, if it takes time and it's more something off in the future, when they do encounter it, because their perspective is short-sighted, they're not going to connect the dots and they're just going to think, well, it was just random. or it's somebody else's fault, or I'm just the victim of unfortunate circumstances because they're not taking the time to connect the dots. And so with the fun way, it's only a matter of time before another impulse starts to swell, another desire presents itself, there's another opportunity, and they repeat the cycle. Only this cycle, it's not a circle. This cycle over the pattern of a life is actually a downward spiral. And the experience of the fun way is they have the impulse, they act on it, and then they get the results of that, and they regularly find themselves in crisis. One crisis after the next, caused by their decision to act rashly and impulsively in the moment. And one of the strong warnings given to the fun way in the Bible is a warning that this pattern can often result in an early death. Like I said, the fun way pattern, in the moment it might seem fun, it might appear to be funny, but you watch it over the course of a life and it's anything but fun and funny. This is a pattern that turns out very, very sad in the end. So what's the hope for this fun way pattern? Because there is hope. I know it's kind of a hopeless point, but there is hope. There's hope to change, just like with all the fools. All the fools can change. And the power to change doesn't come from the individual. The power comes from somewhere else. This is what the fun way needs to do to change. They need to rely on God's grace and learn self-control. On their own, they cannot change. You do not have the power to change this pattern on your own. You need to rely on God's grace, and you need to learn self-control so you can say no to your desires when they begin to swell. Titus chapter 2, verses 11 and 12 talks about this. It says, "For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation for all people, training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions and to live self-controlled, upright, godly lives in the present age." Super helpful verse. What's this saying? Let's unpack it. It says, the grace of God has appeared. Grace is God's muscle applied to sin. It's his power and help in real life. That's what his grace is. It says that this grace has appeared. That's a reference to Jesus. It's a reference to Jesus coming to earth to make a way for us to be forgiven and made right with God. That's why it says that the grace has appeared, bringing salvation for all people. We receive God's grace when we decide to stop being the authority of our lives and commit to follow Jesus. That's the kind of the entryway into receiving God's grace. Now, it says that this grace, it says that it's bringing salvation, but then it also says that this grace is training us. And this is really important. It's training us to renounce certain things, to say no to certain ways of life, ways of thinking, ways of behaving. And in their place, it's training us to live a completely different life than the way that we've lived before. And the way that this training works, a way to think about it is to think of how a trainer might train you at the gym. You know, if you're going to go to the gym and you're going to get a trainer, the trainer does not do the exercises for you. The trainer is not going to lift the weights for you. They're going to show you what to do. They're going to help you. They're going to coach you through it. They're not going to leave you on your own. But you have to put in the effort. And the effort of changing something at the gym, I mean, if you go to the gym and you get a trainer, you know, there's parts of it, it's painful, it can be embarrassing, it can be slow. I mean, having a movement pattern that you have, a muscular movement pattern that's harmful that you need to change, and then learning the right movement pattern and getting things to fire correctly, that can be a slow, painful, embarrassing process. But if you'll submit to the training and listen to the trainer over time, you'll change. And it's the same way when it comes to the Christian life. I mean, what it says is grace is training us. So we're in this lifelong process that's sometimes slow, sometimes embarrassing, sometimes painful, where what God is doing is he's helping us learn to do something completely new. And one of those things, specifically for the fun way, is he's going to help them learn self-control. Learn to say no to the desire, not just let it swell, and then act on it. And if you submit to his training, you will change. If you rely on his help, his grace, his muscle applied to your sin, and you take responsibility for your actions, over time, you will change. There is hope for change, and the hope comes because we rely on God's grace and we learn self-control. So if you're a fun way, I want to leave you with an immediate next step that you could take today. Here's something you could do today that I think is really going to help you if you struggle with this fun way pattern. The first part of this step is start by asking God to help you identify a desire that you need to say no to. My guess is just through the course of this message, a few desires have already come to mind. But if you ask God, God, what's a desire that I need to say no to? He'll answer that and he'll identify one. So start with asking God that question. The second part of it is go to somebody who's wiser than you and ask them to help you think through the consequences. And actually write it down. Like, don't trust your read on it. Don't trust your thinking. Because if you really are a fun way, your perspective is short-sighted. So don't trust yourself on this. Go to somebody wiser and ask them, okay, help me think through the consequences if I act on this specific desire. You know, in 10 minutes, what's going to happen? In 10 hours, what's going to happen? In 10 days, in 10 weeks, in 10 months, in 10 years. What's going to happen if I act on this desire? How is that going to play out? And think through that consequence. Think it out to its logical end with somebody else. And I would write it down. That's something that I've found that's been really helpful for me. When I see it written out on paper, it kind of wakes me up. But for a fun way, you got to get out of your head. You got to learn, okay, I can't just take this impulse and act on it. I need to get somebody else's eyes on this, somebody else giving input in the situation and think through, if I take this and do it, what's going to happen? That's a great first step for a fun way to begin to rely on God's grace and learn self-control. There is hope, but it takes God's grace and it takes self-control. Let's wrap up and let's pray. Father God, I thank you that there is hope because of what you've done. I thank you that you don't just tell us what to do, you also help us do it. And that's what your grace is it's your power that shows up in our lives to help us. We have a part to play. We have to take action. We have to take responsibility. But at the same time, there's so much help available. So God, I pray for all of us who are fools in recovery. God, I pray that you would help us rely on your grace and you would help us learn self-control so that our desires do not determine what we do, but we decide to do based on what you've said to do. Father, I pray that you would allow that to happen. I thank you for the help. In Jesus' name, amen.